Alexis, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
Welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome back as well.
What episode is this?
37.
37. Good. We have Aaron, our favorite New Zealander.
Yes.
Is here. Aaron
right.
Walsh, which we'll bring him on in just a second. Aaron was with us about 30 days ago and talked to us about mental skills and how it works in some of the athletes he does, but then also how it works in for everybody. And we've asked him to come and join us for 2 or 3 more episodes over the course of this year. And we're going to do some deep dives. So anyway, it's going to be fun.
Yes.
It's going to be fun.
I'm
Did you do anything fun this weekend?
I decorated the house for Halloween. My son is 5. He'll be 5 in 2 weeks, I think. That's terrible. I should know exactly when. However, this year he's actually really excited about decorating. Before he wasn't, and so this time we had the whole front of the house done, and he stepped back and he said, "Guys, come here." And so we all stood there together and we looked at it and he goes, "This is great. Thank you." And I was like, "You're so welcome.
Yeah.
What is happening?"
He approves.
He did. Yeah. What about you?
Had a friend in town. Aaron, we had a alumni rugby game at my.
Wow!
At my, it was the 20-year anniversary, 40-year anniversary of the club at where I played when I went to school, John Brown University, and it was 20 years since some of us had graduated. And so my good friend and roommate from college who lives in Ecuador came in, stayed with us for the weekend, and then he played in the rugby match. I chose not to play because I wanted to walk today.
Oh.
I wanted to be able to, move around.
That's fair. Did it get pretty?
It was good. It rained. It rained like crazy, and nobody was seriously injured. There was a few injuries, but it was fun to watch.
Did you participate in the aftermatch?
I did.
Formalities?
Yes, I did actually.
Okay.
That was a good part.
Most important part.
Yeah.
This part you want to participate
That's
in?
right. But anyways, it was fun. I was thinking, man, this is kind of strange that I'm doing this, and then on Tuesday I'm talking to Aaron, who
It was very timely.
works in this space. So, anyways, we had a good weekend, and it was good to see.
Would have been high quality rugby, the sort of rugby I'm used to. So I'm bummed that I'm.
Yeah, it was not high quality. It was not All Blacks. I'm telling you, it was 40-year-olds running around or hobbling around trying to catch the younger guys.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Probably looked like a few boys fighting in a tent.
That's right. Yeah. No, they did good. It was great to see. So, anyways, that was my weekend. All right, so let's jump into this episode. Last time we talked in general about mental skills, Aaron. What we thought we'd kind of hone in on, if you get a chance to listen to the last one, it was about 30 days ago. I forgot which episode was Aaron on last time. 32? Anybody remember? 31? All right, we'll look it up. They'll look it up here in a second, but it was about 30 days ago, and we talked in general about mental skills. This one's going to be kind of narrowed into what we call leading self. So you lead self and you lead others. This is around leading yourself, which is kind of the first step, and it's about your physical well-being, mental well-being, and your relationships. And so we thought we'd kind of dive into that a bit, Aaron, and have a conversation around it. But did you remind people those 4 pillars that you talk about for wellness? Just remind them what those 4 pillars are, and then we can kind of step through each one of them.
Yeah, before I just rip into that, I have to just note your introduction, and I will inform Mr. Foran that I've overtaken him as your favorite New Zealander. And I'm sure he'll be delighted with that.
Don't tell him that. Don't tell him that. That's hilarious. That's so funny.
Yeah, just because he's gone and leading Air New Zealand, he's been relegated that quickly. Huh?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Greg who? Who's that?
Yeah, exactly. Hey,
I immediately look at Jimmy
probably the 4 things. So when I look at the overall well-being of an individual, I think it's not just this simple process, right? Because we're not robots, we're people, so we have variance and differences in our experience, or not always the same. But I've found, that people who have a value and a plan around how they're going to look after the physical side of their life. So when we talk about physical, we talk about exercise, we talk about nutrition. we talk about sleeping. So they tend to be the three pillars on the physical side. If we start ticking them away, some good things happen. And then I suppose on the emotional and mental side, we begin to talk about probably the key influence in all of our emotional and mental regulation is our relationships. And, probably the most significant one is the relationship that we have with ourselves, which we tend to don't dive into deeply, but that's probably the foundational relationship we need to curate more than any other, because, if we don't see or view ourselves appropriately, or we don't view ourselves healthily, it's very difficult to have healthy relationships, because the overflow of our self-perception always leaks into our relational circles. So, that becomes, I think, a really important part of learning how to manage those. And then I think what we talked about last time was, once that foundation is in place, then we can work on growing our mindset, and then we can work out how we grow under pressure. But what I've found is that our mindset is so deeply influenced by the self-management of our lives, is that it's no point just going straight into, I'm going to change my mindset today, without changing the key habits that influence that mindset.
Yeah, each one of those. Yeah, it's so true. And we were talking about actually a different model with somebody else, not about health, but about business. And you got to get the basics basically right, and then you move your way up. And it feels like that's for ourselves as well. It's this pyramid. So let's take sleep. Why is sleep important? Based on some of the things that you've looked at and people you worked with, and maybe even your research. Why is sleep important? And we'll get into possibly some tips and tricks on how to get better at it. But why should we worry about sleep?
Yeah, I think the first reference point, if anybody has any extra time, outside of this podcast, Matthew Walker is probably the leading sleep specialist in the world, and he's been on recently with Andrew Huberman, who I absolutely love, who's a neuroscientist out of Stanford. And so what sort of Walker's conclusion was around sleep is, like, he saw sleep as the building block, or the key foundation of well-being. And he talked about the regulation that happens within our bodies when we sleep. So, what we can imagine sometimes is, the best analogy I've sort of used about it is, if you've ever got a router at home that's not working very well, and it's jumpy and it's fidgety, and it's amazing, the instruction from the highest and most brilliant technical minds in the world are just unplug it.
Right.
You think, well, have you got more than that? No, just unplug it for 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's right.
And I kind of see sleep like that. I see sleep as the unplugging of our life from normal operations, so we can reset the systems that are critical for us to function.
Got it.
And so if you don't get that right, so I'll give you a really interesting bit of research. It does relate to the sporting side of things, but I think it's really, really helpful. Sure. Is that, like, if there's some testing that was done in the last couple of years, and I think a big tip off to this, the NFL, NBA, and MLB, the major place of investment in spending of money outside of the daily operational costs from an R&D perspective is sleep. So they have sleep rooms, and most of the clubhouses now, they have these little pods, and it's the miracle called sleep, which is very, very interesting.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, and the reason why is it wasn't that long ago where sleep was almost looked down on.
Right? Isn't it great though? Like, remember the hustle era where I go to bed at 12 and I wake up at 4, I'm the man. And everyone's going, no, that's the worst thing you could possibly do, because you're not giving any of your systems time to recover to perform well.
That's right.
So, we did some testing around some of our athletes, and we're talking about 20 to 30% reduction in VO2 max and max reps on strength testing when you change their sleep from 8 hours to 6 hours a night over 3 days. So just from a pure physiological, you don't perform well. You don't feel well. Cognitively, there's so much research around the cognitive decision-making, just clarity of mind that is interrupted. And I think going back to, just a real practical example is, you think about when you want to get information or you want to break someone, and it's been a interrogation tactic for years, is just to create a sleep vacuum where people don't sleep. So our ancestors have known this, and so I think that's probably what changed over the years, is that our ancestors understood that when the sun went down in the winter, you slept longer and you recovered, and in the summer you probably slept a little bit more because you're out in the fields early and you're harvesting. but they had a natural rhythm around sleep, which enabled them to sleep in an appropriate way in order to be able to feel good to go for the next day.
I feel recovered. That's great. Sleep is something that I need to work on. But if somebody's struggling with it, and you hear a lot about insomnia, you hear a lot about, and there's definitely some medical situations that causes it as well. But there's also stressors and everything else. What are some simple tips and tricks that somebody should be thinking about if they want to improve their sleep?
Yeah, I think as you said, it's quite different for everyone. So, some of it might be physiological. So something as simple as get your room dark enough and have it at an appropriate temperature to sleep. That's a physiological thing. You might have some sleep hygiene that you partake in. So you turn your screens off, an hour, 90 minutes before you sleep. And, 15 minutes before you go to sleep, you go out into your neighborhood. If it's one that you can do this, and like I do it every night, I go out for a 30-minute walk before I go to sleep. I want to get in the dark. I don't want all those lights and blue lights and all that sort of stuff. So, that's obviously from a physical aspect, and trying to have a routine where you go to bed at the same time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think mentally and emotionally, that's a whole nother discussion, because that at that point, it's not about sleep hygiene. It's about what are the things that are causing you to not even overthink, but think too deeply at a time where you need to be relaxed. And that's probably a whole nother discussion point for a whole nother day. But,
sure.
That anxiety stuff tends to be the biggest thing.
Yeah,
right?
anxiety.
So,
we were just talking about
anxiety to me is quite a simple thing. It's trying to have control where the situation doesn't allow it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we, Alexis and I both have the Whoop strap. Have you heard of Whoop strap?
Yeah.
So we both have that.
Yes, we are both elite athletes.
Yes.
And that is why we
get flagged all the time.
All the time.
Man, you guys are.
Ambassadors, influencers, all of that
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah.
But it tracks sleep.
It
And
does.
I guess it tracks recovery and strain. And there's all kinds of, we were talking about the Apple Watch earlier, there's Fitbit, there's all these other types of things. Do you find that those help? Are those tools for individuals to use no matter what they are? But
I have a Garmin. I just use Garmin.
Okay.
But incredibly important for me, I'll give you from a couple of things, was yes, the sleep and stuff like that, but also energy. So I can get a good idea of my energy expenditure every day, and then I can match that to my nutritional needs. Rather than just guessing around that. So, so I use it in sleep and probably in energy management.
Got it. That makes sense. How are you using your Whoop strap, Alexis?
It started out with what they call strain. So if I were to go and do a workout and, see how hard I'm exercising, or the benefits of that.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it kind of transitioned into the recovery aspect, because I have yet to get a green recovery, and I've had this for 3 months. What? I've only had 2, and it was within the first 2 weeks that I had it. And since then, it's always been in the yellow and the red. And so me also having a bit of anxiety, just a little bit, immediately is oh my gosh, what's going on?
It just added
What's
to your
happening?
anxiety.
Oh yeah, just put it on there on top. But it's interesting because sleep-wise, I'll get 100% of my sleep, but I don't feel rested.
Your variable heart rate will be, that's what drives recovery, right? Mm-hmm. And how long have you had it?
I've had it for about 5 months now.
Yeah, so it should be kicking in by now.
Yeah. Love the reports, though. I think those are, helpful just to kind of see what's going on. But
what else do you use it for?
Oh, well, other than just checking to see if I'm in the top ranked spot. No.
In strain?
Always, 100%. Yeah. No, I just like to check and see if I am getting good sleep.
Yeah.
There are days where I feel super rested, and I'll look and I've only, gotten 6 hours, but it wasn't interrupted, which was great.
Yeah.
And so if there's any parents out there that are struggling with small children, not going to bed and end up sleeping in the same bed as you, that's been really interesting to see the variability of that.
How much do you actually,
Yes. Usually getting slapped in the face or
right.
waking up. And,
right.
Yeah. What about you? How do you use yours?
I look at recovery. I look at recovery and strain are the two things I look at. I can feel a difference when it's green. I can for sure feel a difference when it's red. So when it's red, I'm like, I can really feel it. And I find, and this would be interesting, Aaron, I find it typically has to do with the diet that I have the day before. I think we've talked about this before. So if I don't eat well the day before, I don't sleep well that night. And then I wake up and it's red. Is that
very interesting?
Have you seen that before?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting point you make. I think you got to look at nutrition, I think, probably through a couple of lenses. One is a physiological lens. So energy management to me is critical, right? So you talked about it before. So I think we operate best when we're right on that edge of getting the needs, what we need from our food, and meeting those needs as close as we can. I think we get in trouble when we're really underneath those energy needs, or we're over the top. So, chronic under eating or under fueling, if you want to use that term, then all of a sudden, geez, you're in trouble. But also if you're completely overfueled all the time, like there's that sluggishness, there's that apathy, there's that sense of that. So, like I'll get to a few practical tools afterwards, but I was just reading an article this morning recently enough where someone was trying to debuff or debunk the whole reality of calories in versus calories out. And what they failed to cite within the research is that all the people that they talked about calories out underreported their calories by 60% on average.
60%? 60%.
Yeah. If you do not do like a food diary, and you
it's
do
crazy.
the work of getting on, the different apps that are available, like MyFitnessPal or whatever, and putting it in and measuring your food, how can you be accurate?
Yeah, it can't be.
Yeah. Wow.
And so one, I think that there's not an accuracy. So if you're not accurate in what you're putting into your body, then how do you know what fuel you have in there and what future fuel or past fuel has impact on you currently? So like I'm pretty strict on it now, where I measure everything I eat, and people go, well, that's hard. I'm like, it was much harder being 100 pounds overweight. That was hard. In comparison, this is not hard. This is just something I got to do every day to stay healthy.
Do you find nutrition and eating in general, that some individuals have to kind of go through some mental work to they may use it as a soothing, something to make them feel better. They may have underlying emotional concerns. I wouldn't say concern, emotional things that they want to work through that enables them to get on the path as well.
Yeah, and I think it can be quite different from person to person. We're not talking here about eating disorders. We're talking predominantly about people who are going, okay, I've been accustomed, or I've got used to operating at this certain level of fuel in my body. And it's obviously too much because my weight keeps on increasing year after year. So I'm putting in more than I'm using. So I'm going to make some adjustments and bring it back to equilibrium, and even look at going into a slight deficit so I can get control of my appetite and control of my body.
Sure.
So I can work through that. So for some people, the mental shift is, just think about this for all of us, right? Our bad eating started with a habit, and our good eating needs to start with a habit.
That's great.
I think it's really interesting with 2020, 2021. I think a lot of people are on social media a lot more now. I know I am. Yeah. And comparison, as they say, is the thief of happiness. And I feel like oftentimes when we've kind of taken a step back and we see somebody else's highlights, right? And we're like, man, what? Or like, wow, they look so great, or they're having such a great time, or, things are going really well for them. They look happy, they look healthy. And then I start, comparing that to myself and realizing, ooh, I got a long ways to go. And I think a lot of the, topics that we're talking about now, where it's like mental and emotional, a lot of that really does play so much into your physical self.
Sure.
And so I think it's really important that, this is something that we're talking about, because the mental space of it, comparing yourself, or the anxiety, or, even stepping on a scale and saying, wow, things have changed, or
Right.
like now I'm opening my eyes to what's going on. It can be very overwhelming, like you said, Aaron. And so like, what are some of those small steps that somebody can take without being overwhelmed by, here's that goal that I'm thinking of that's like way far away, like you said, like here's where I want to end, here's where I want to end up, but like how do I start taking some of those smaller steps? Like what would be some of those things that could help
Yeah,
people
it's brilliant. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the work of Albert Bandura. So Bandura was probably one of the leading grandfathers of psychology. And I think he's still alive in his late 90s, just an incredible man, and sort of came up with this whole social theory of cohesion and all of that. But he talked about goal setting. And there's an amazing interview did with Michael Gervais around goal setting. And he talked about proximal and distal goals. And I think it's a really, really good way of looking at it. So I look at it like a distal goal is like, when you jump in your car and you put in your GPS address and you go, this is where I want to go. That's my distal goal, right? So, but the proximal goal is every turn you need to take to get there. So what I like to have people sort of when they begin the journey is go, why don't you focus on your proximal goals? So today, your proximal goal might be, I want to eat well, and here's what eating well looks like. And that's the first step to getting to the distal goal. So I think where we get overwhelmed by goal setting is we don't connect proximal and distal. Like we think, oh man, there's this big thing, I got to lose 100 pounds. Well, how do you lose 100 pounds? Okay, well, 1 pound at a time, right? So what are the habits that I can develop today that contribute to that? And then as you were saying before, then our focus becomes on non-outcome success measures. So our focus becomes on then just doing a really good job in the processes we know that are really critical for us to be healthy, rather than being caught up and overwhelmed by a number, and trusting that that process is actually the way forward to the number going down. So, I mean, this, I've weighed myself some mornings and then gone and had a cup of coffee and re-weighed myself and I'm like 3 pounds heavier. Like that could be incredibly discouraging if my behaviors weren't aligned, right? So you got to align those behaviors, which are your proximal goals to the outcome, which is your distal goal.
Yeah, and I think it's also, coming to the conclusion that it's a lifestyle. It's not when you say a diet, you eat all the time, so you're always on a diet. It's just how good is your diet, and so
I think the American Association of Nutrition had some facts. Like if you had lost 50 pounds, you were 90% likely to put on 60, and the reason is that people went for goals, not for changes of life.
That's right. Yeah. That's a great stat. A great stat. One of the things I find helpful is, let's say I had a weekend and I didn't eat great. Instead of trying to go all the way on Monday and be like, I'm cutting my calories and I'm going to eat
only
good.
Spinach.
And I go all because I've done it that way too.
Yeah.
Like total extremes, right? I've gone, this has been a journey for me.
Yep.
What I find more helpful is, all right, Monday, I want to get back on track. I'm just going to eat really, really healthy food today. I'm not going to worry about how much I eat. If I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. But the only thing I'm going to eat is healthy stuff. So it's going to be, vegetables, fruits, and, some protein. But get some of the other stuff that's get it out of my diet for a couple of days. And then start thinking about, all right, now I want to maybe restrict some calories if I'm trying to lose weight, for example. And so it's not like where I struggle is if I go all the way and be like, all right, I'm going to eat 700 calories a day, for a while. That's really hard for me to sustain. So it's learning, I think, for you as an individual, like what works for you. But it never stops.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
Now, when I first met with a nutritionist, the best information that they gave me was, the first question they asked was not what you eat, what your preferences were, is all of that. What is sustainable?
Yeah, yes. That's a good way to say it.
And that was the best bit of advice I've ever had around nutrition. So I had a kickstart with keto, but I knew keto wasn't sustainable for me. Like I couldn't do this
forever
for the next.
Yeah.
It was just not a system. So I had to rule that out. So I started off with sustainability. Like, is this something I could do for the rest of my life? So that means like last night we went out for dinner and, we had steak and whatever and a little bit of cheesecake and that, but that's part of life, right? But I understand during that day where I was at from an energy management perspective to be able to have that.
All right. So let's move on to the third one, which is exercise. So how important, like if you had to prioritize exercise versus nutrition, which one would you prioritize?
Nutrition for me by far.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. If I can't fuel my body appropriately, or if I don't have that foundation of like I feel good and I feel strong, I know that's all very subjective. Like I want to wake up every day. I want to have energy. I want to feel strong, and I want to be able to have that energy carry through for the day. I don't care really how that takes place, but I do know the key foundational block for that occurring is what I eat.
Got it.
And so I could, if I just eat well and then not as focused on exercise. So I think it's a really good question you asked, because I think a lot of people struggle with, they start a gym routine and they really want to change this part of their life and really improve physically, but they haven't done anything for a while, or that's been not as intense. And all of a sudden, that first week, you have insatiable hunger that you cannot contain.
Yeah.
And then that work that you've done all week is now counterbalanced by the reality of, it's not fair, right? An hour on the treadmill can be destroyed in 3 minutes in a bowl of cereal.
Yeah, it's not fair. It's so funny you say that. When I first started down this journey years ago, I either exercised really well and ate horribly, or I ate really well or like too well, and I didn't have enough energy, so I didn't exercise. It was almost impossible for me to do both at the same time. to be on a really good diet.
Energy management, and I guarantee your exercise was probably intense.
Yeah.
So that's what I've changed as I've got a little bit older. I'm 45, so now it's not running.
Yeah.
It's going for a nice long walk. It's not trying to take my bike up over the mountains. It's taking my bike down by the river.
Right.
It's not trying to bench press, 350 pounds. It's doing my band work and my stretching. Like it's just changed because I don't have the ability to manage that energy as maybe when I did as a young man.
Isn't that?
I don't have those needs.
Yeah. That's so funny.
That's really interesting. So in high school, it was very easy for me to eat anything I wanted and to, continue doing the sports that I was in.
Sure.
And it was fine. And then in college, I had to step it up just a little bit. College, wow, freshman 15, more like freshman 55. And I was eating really well in college. And, when I hit my 20s, I felt this really good pace of eating well, working out. It worked out really well for me. And then once I've hit 30, none of it worked.
Yeah. Wait till you're 40.
Yeah. That's what everyone tells me. I'm like, no, but 30 is awful. And, so trying to kind of figure out how your body changes in those, as you get older in those years. I think that's really important too. And having information about that. Because sometimes
the encouraging thing is I lost all of those 100 odd pounds post 35.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. All of it was done post 35.
That's fantastic.
But also you had to understand geez, okay, I have to change my intake.
Right.
You hear, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's always great for a quote, said that, abs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym.
Yeah.
And what I think he was referring to was the reality of my nutrition is still the most important part of my, of looking after my physique.
Yeah.
All right. So that said, though, exercise plays a role, right? And it plays a role.
Massive role.
Yeah, it plays a
role.
Even
mentally, emotionally, we know with the chemical cocktail that is really released through exercise. So it goes way beyond fresh air, vitamin D, all the stuff that we know is really, really good for us. I'd always recommend, I know it's hard, particularly for you guys as you're coming into a bit of a colder season or you've just come out of the summer, get outside.
Yeah.
Get outside. I'm not anti-gym, but get outside, enjoy creation, enjoy nature, walk around. I think it's just there's so many great benefits to exercising outside.
That's right.
That go beyond just, some people, the gym's the only option, but I understand that. But
Aaron, how's mental health connected to exercise? What's going on when you're exercising, whether that's an intense exercise or just getting out and going for a walk? How does that connect to your mental health?
I think biologically, the endorphins are huge, right?
Yeah.
So we know that has massive effect on the way we feel about ourselves. So, all the hormones and, that are floating around like that's massive. But what I think is mentally and emotionally, internally, and this is what I think a lot of us observe through the lockdowns that we've been experiencing, is that our mental health is really actually attached to our sense of purpose. And so when you take away purpose, you take away an anchor which our mental health needs to be attached to. So when someone exercises, in a strange way, you bring them into a bit of more purposeful action.
That's so true.
That brings a sense of accomplishment and pride around the way that they're living their life, rather than that sense of maybe I'm just a bit sloppy and I'm not giving myself the best opportunity here.
That's a great point.
Yeah, purpose is so important, right? So what am I trying to accomplish here? What's bigger than me in this? And when we took away work life, which COVID has affected for us, is particularly with our athletes, they're like, well, what is my purpose outside of what I do? Because I haven't yet been able to locate my purpose in who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I think there is a sense that when you get done with a workout or something, you have this sense of accomplishment.
Yes.
You definitely feel that. And I one of the things I say is, 70% of the time, I don't really want to exercise, right? But about 90% of the time afterwards, I'm really happy I did, right? It's a choice that I have to make each time I do it, and it's probably that sense of accomplishment after, like, hey, I checked something off the list, I got something done, I feel good. Yeah, it's probably that feeling that really.
Well, you think from our ancestors too, like physical side was so important, right? So you think as an ancestor, if you went out and ran around the hills and came back with a prize, you felt good about yourself, like your tribe and your people celebrated you. But like, I just think there's so much of our mental states connected to our physical activity. So you think about people who just sit at home all day and they're not moving, they're on screens, or like, how do you change their mental health? And we talk about this epidemic of social media addiction and all that, and I get all that. But we've got to create alternatives, not just criticism. So what happens if people start moving? If they start moving, they're not on their screens as much. They feel a sense of accomplishment. Their bodies feel better. So I know that, like, just the big push, the simple movements, if that's, like, I remember a friend who ran a marathon. This is literally how he started off. He ran to a lamppost and then ran back home and stopped day one. And he just kept on going to the next lamppost and the next lamppost. And like, you don't run a marathon on your first day. You do it by learning to run a mile.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think the short-term reward systems that have been generated by modern society have discouraged us from process and hard work and patience over time.
That's right.
To reverse the changes that need to be reversed. Like, if you've been unhealthy for 25 years, you're not going to change it in 3 months, but you might in 12. So I think you're dead right. There's such a mental and association with accomplishment. There's such a mental, a sense of like, yeah, okay, I'm actually living the way that I want to. And I've gone out and done a half an hour walk, and that's part of who I want to be and the person I want to be.
It almost feels like it doesn't even matter what the goal is. No. As long as it's achievable and you can get it done, as small as it is, that starts you. That starts you down. Now, if you're an athlete and you're trying to make, the rugby team or whatever, then your goals your physical goals really, really matter. But for your average individual, setting something that's incredibly easy to obtain, but just that you get that sense of accomplishment, probably is a good starting point.
Atomic habits, that's what, it's become the key sort of phrase, is small things done well over time make huge differences.
Yeah, that's right.
I was just thinking about our store associates. One associate stuck out in my mind. It was like, 5 years ago or so, right before I joined the company. And they said, one day wanted to do a push-up. I didn't know how to do a push-up. And so I was like, okay, where's this going? Awesome. This sounds really interesting and I want in. And they were like, yeah, so anytime that I had my break on shift, I would try to do a push-up in the break room. And then it kind of like turned into this community aspect where associates that were also like on break at the same time, they would do like, all right, let's do our 10 push-ups. And they made it this huge thing. And so when we talk about the mental aspect of it, feeding into that, health and physical,
right.
but also the relationships, I think that that's really interesting.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be, hey, I'm going to go run a marathon.
Yeah. Like what
or,
are those
hey,
small
I'm
things?
going to go do this, or I'm going to go, be the next, athlete.
Yeah.
It's truly small things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. All right. We're almost out of time. But wanted to dip into relationships for a bit. So we could probably have, a whole series on relationships. And Aaron, I know you're not, I don't even know what would that word be.
Not a relationship counselor,
Yeah,
but I've
yes.
experience in relationships.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, aren't we all? So
one particular relationship.
yes. So, but talk about just the impact that you see in athletes in relationships. So how do relationships impact some of the athletes that you worked with, and whether it's negatively or positively, and how do you encourage them there?
Yeah, I think the relationship is a two-folded view for me. The first is how you relate to yourself. So, I think that's the foundational one when we talk about relationships. Is there is so much negative self-talk. There's so much inner criticism. The inner critic for particularly athletes is really high, because you think about their world versus our world. Like you've had, a cool weekend with your old buddies and you come into work Monday, and I'm sure you've got reports and things that you're working on, but you haven't been critiqued in social media. You haven't been on the news incessantly over the weekend.
Yeah.
So there's almost this built-in mechanism around criticism is just something that I have and I accept. And unfortunately, at times I take on too much. And so we have to probably work hard. So we talk about it. I don't know what it's like within US sports, but we talk about it in our teams, the danger of what we call a work on culture. And I think it's really relevant to, I don't know whether you have it within your business, but like you'll go and do a review with someone and there's almost no mention of what you do well. There's only mention of what you need to improve on. And it's almost like, from week to week, your focus becomes on areas of improvement. Whereas I think, what we try to do is an 80-20 balance. So 80% of our feedback is around what you're doing well, and then what we keep wanting you to do well, because that's why you're in the room. Now, 20% of it. So our thing is focus on your strengths, be aware of your weaknesses. Most people focus on their weaknesses and are only aware of their strengths. Yeah. So then their inner dialogue is governed out of that place, right? So you think about, I've got to know you two now, but I imagine for both of you, if we were to put a thing that could capture your inner dialogue every day, would be really interesting.
I'm laughing at Alexa. You wouldn't want that, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Go ahead.
So can you see though, like if you don't get that foundation right, you're carrying the residue either negatively or positive of your self-image into every relationship you engage with.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then all of those relationships become impacted by the way that you see yourself and the way that you relate to yourself. And, I think, the good book says, and we've heard it often, right? Love others like you love yourself. But can you understand that? Like you have to love yourself to love others.
That is the hardest
relationship. That's a hard
relationship.
piece of work.
Yep.
Interesting. That's a good point, Alexis.
Yeah, that is so tough. And, I think 2020 and just being cooped up, with yourself and your emotions and your thoughts, it can be a very upsetting place.
Yeah.
It could also be a great place, though, if you're healthy in that aspect. But yeah, your relationship with yourself is so important.
Yeah. I love how you said that's the hardest relationship. I've never heard that. That's really good.
So one way, Alexis, I reckon, and you might be my experiment on this, which could be fun, is that we do 3 questions, as a unit, family unit, that I think are good to ask all the time. We don't do it all the time, but what were you proud of today? Where did you get joy? And what did you learn?
Ooh.
So just those 3 sort of reflective questions, I think they're really, really helpful, because what we're generating is evidence around how we're growing and advancing as a person. And once we see that evidence, that's so powerful to our inner perception, right? Like our brain is really smart. You can't look in a mirror and say, I'm the greatest, I'm feeling good, I'm going to be magnificent. Your brain will go, BS, where are the actions that confirm that?
Yep.
So when you begin to go, this is where I showed courage today, this is where I showed joy or compassion, or this is what I learned, this is what I'm going to apply tomorrow. You're building a database of evidence that fuels your self-image, not based on BS, but based on reality.
Man, that's crazy. I know when the moment that I became a parent, I feel like I had to start all over again. Because I didn't, like, I wanted to be a certain type of like parent and person for my son. And realized, I had trauma growing up and, everyone has trauma. And so how does that impact you and how does it make you who you are today? So a lot of therapy and a lot of, what do I need to kind of address and talk about with myself? And it's funny that you asked those three questions because I asked my son, what were you proud of and where did you find your happiness? So I think that's fantastic. I just don't do it with myself. So that's an issue.
Yeah. Well, I think it's critical to do it with ourselves, like, because then I can look at my day and go, I felt like I was just a waste of space today. I didn't contribute to anyone. And I feel really disappointed in my discipline. That might be it. Yeah. But then I go, no, did I show courage or is there anything I was proud of today? Okay, where did I find a bit of joy? What brought me joy today? And what did I learn? Then all of a sudden, okay, we're still growing. We're still moving forward. It was a bit slower today, but we're still moving forward.
Yeah. And I think everybody struggles with this, but particularly driven, high-performing individuals or high-pressure situations struggle with that. As far as having the thing that you focus on is not what went well, it's what didn't go well. Yeah. And I would say, like for me personally, vast majority of my thought is around what could I do better. Very, 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 very seldom am I thinking about, hey, that was great, right? And but it's you're trained almost, and then you're trained in some ways to that's how you get better, right? Yep. But I like the ratio of 80% focusing on your strength, 20 because you do need to understand where you have gaps and you need to work on those. But 80% of the time,
I think the key word made of focus versus awareness.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yep.
Yeah. So focus is. This is what I'm predominantly looking at. Awareness, this is what sits in the background. Yeah.
I think that's interesting. There have been a few times where I've asked people, hey, what are your strengths? Like, what do you think you're good in? I mean, people ask me that too. And
it's hard to answer.
Yes. Yeah. We struggle with it. We don't know what it is. But the minute you ask me what's something you can work on,
I got the list.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating.
But think about it. We're doing this now and you're in the room and you've got the job you have, not because of what you couldn't do, but because of what you can do.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You don't get hired because of things that you can't do.
Yeah. So if we stop working on the things that are critical to our success because we're trying to find something that could bring a 3% gain, then the loss over time is not worth it. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that we neglect it. It just means that we know what our priorities are as far as what we're focusing on.
I'm going to bring you to my evaluation. And if you could explain that would be fantastic. No, that's good. I like that.
That's really good.
I like that a lot. Yeah. Aaron, we got a lot. We're out of time, but we have 2 more of these that will be coming, and we'll get into probably mindset, and we'll probably get into pressure, and then eventually we want to get into leading others because we also want to create an environment where these type of conversations are ones that you can have with your teams or even with your families. And we talked about last time you were on this idea that mental health is losing its stigma. And it's becoming normalized. And so we need to get better at, not only for ourselves, because it starts with ourselves, you start with leading yourself, but as you lead others, you want to create that environment. And so we'll eventually, Aaron, with you, we'll eventually get to that in the coming months. But thanks for your time. You're going to make a difference.
Oh, lovely. Always good to be with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. It's great conversations, and we'll hook back up with you here in a month or so. So stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
All right, talk soon.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.